once we're ready with all that.
Okay. So Liz is going to close second.
Nope, Michelle closes last, so Liz will get the first question.
So wait, who's got the opening first?
So Liz has the first question. So the first question goes to Liz, and
Right,
then
but who's going to open first? Is that Liz first?
yes.
Thank you. Thank you.
Okay, and I'll let folks in as they appear in the waiting room. But Jeff, it's all yours.
All right, excellent. Good morning, everyone. My name is Jeff Taccio. I'm the chairperson of the Hingham Business Council, which is an arm of the South Shore Chamber of Commerce. Today, we've got a selectman position moderated presentation between two candidates, Michelle Larned, and then also with Liz Klein. Joe Kelly, who's the third candidate, is not able to make today's presentation. It's May 10th, and this will be recorded, kept on YouTube, other platforms as we go forward. And we have with us, Peter Foreman is here from the South Shore Chamber. I'm being assisted by Eric Dykeman. And then also on behalf of the Hingham Business Council, our leadership councilors, Mark Ryan, Jim Murphy, and John Mannion, who are all participating and put together various questions for me to be able to ask of the candidates. As we start, I'd like to ask Liz Klein if she could provide the opening, introduce herself, and you've got about 3 minutes for an opening statement. Thank you very much.
Great. Thank you. Hello, everybody. Thank you to the Hingham Business Council for hosting today's candidate forum. I'm Liz Klein. I'm a candidate for the Hingham Select Board. Many people ask why I would choose to seek election this year. The easy answer is that I love Hingham and want to serve our community. I am seeking the privilege of serving in a significant role in town government to address the flaws exposed by the pandemic and to tackle the many challenges we face, from recovering from COVID-19 to the ongoing threat of climate change. One of our biggest issues will be balancing the level of services our citizens expect and deserve with the available funding sources, while at the same time maintaining our AAA bond rating. A little bit about me. I grew up in Connecticut. After graduating from the University of Richmond with a degree in finance, my professional career began as a financial services consultant at Accenture, working with Fortune 500 clients. Over the past 25 years, I have worked on projects of all sizes in strategic planning, corporate education, marketing strategy, and human resources. I have direct experience managing people and multi-million-dollar budgets, developing strategic plans, and designing the organizational structure required to execute those plans. My husband and I have lived in Hingham for over 15 years, and during that time, I have been an active leader in the community. My town experience includes service on the Hingham Master Plan Committee, Hingham Downtown Association as Executive Director, Hingham's 375th Anniversary Committee, the Hingham Women's Club as President and Treasurer, School Council, and the Hingham Education Foundation. The experience leading the Hingham Downtown Association was invaluable in understanding the local economy, the importance of our downtown, and the comprehensive strategy for Hingham, including South Hingham and the 3A corridor, including the shipyard. Over the past 18 months, I have researched, discussed, and prioritized the goals and actions outlined in the Hingham Master Plan. This experience has given me direct exposure to the issues facing our town, as well as the opportunities we can pursue over the next 10 to 15 years. Through my work with the Planning Board, Hingham Development and Industrial Commission, and the South Shore Chamber, I have a good understanding of the development opportunities. I look forward to continuing to work with all of you to attract new businesses. We must be welcoming to new businesses, as well as the people who want to live and work here. I also look forward to working with business leaders in surrounding towns to create a strong regional strategy for business diversification to benefit the entire South Shore. The budget continues to be an issue for Hingham as the cost of services are growing faster than the revenue. New growth from responsible commercial development is critical to our success as a community. Throughout my volunteer and professional experience, I have a strong track record of working well with people who hold different perspectives to achieve common goals. I look forward to earning your vote on or before May 22nd. Thank you.
Great, thank you very much. Michelle, you get 3 minutes for your introductory comments.
All right. I'm running for the select board to help build a stronger, more resilient, more future-ready Hingham. We need to improve communication on town channels and throughout the community so that residents receive timely, critical updates and officials are better able to plan. We must ensure that our schools are structurally sound and fully staffed now into the future. And we need to build a more flexible, more inclusive, and greener Hingham. I want to increase transparency of how the town does business and help increase town involvement among the citizens of our community. I attended Florida Gulf Coast University and have first a bachelor's degree in business management, and then I went back and got a bachelor's in social work. I then got a master's in social work, and I am now an independently licensed clinical social worker. I work as the director of clinical services for VinFin, and I serve Quincy down through Plymouth, Cape and the Islands, doing risk mitigation and training for them. I have lived in Hingham with my wife, Lee, for 6 years. We met in Florida in 2010, just after I came home from Iraq, and moved to Massachusetts in 2012 because she knew she wanted to come back to her hometown. We got married and chose to buy a home in Hingham, first because it was her hometown, but also because we wanted a strong, inclusive community in which to grow our family. In my first 4th of July here, I just thought it was one of the most amazing things to see the red, white, and blue down the street. And it felt like a town out of a TV show. And I really wanted to be a part of that. I'm a founding member of the board of the Hingham Pride Project, and I'm so excited about what the future holds for this organization. I'm also a volunteer for the Pat Roche Hospice House, and I can be found there most Sunday evenings prepping meals for the residents. I've also begun volunteering with the Hingham Historical Society on a research project to review the newspapers from the 1800s, looking for the names of Black and Indigenous people of color who have lived in our community. That all started because I got really excited about doing the haunted walk with the Historical Society and decided I wanted to be more involved with them. I've spent my entire life in service to others, and my hope is that I can continue by serving this community as the next member of the select board. We need to look hard at how we do business and think creatively how we can move this town forward in a way that serves all of its citizens. A vote for me is a vote for an approachable, accessible, and caring town government.
Great, thank you very much. I appreciate it. First question, Michelle. So for the Business Council, what I'm going to do is our membership is interested, I think, primarily in just approach to business, business to town relationships, and just how that aspect of our economy can grow and be supported by the town. What's your vision on Hingham current business culture, business presence, and what you would foresee as the future in town?
Well, I think one of the things that we need to do is we need to make this a place that is comfortable for businesses to operate. And so that means taking a close look at taxes. I know there's a big discussion about single versus split tax rate. And I think the risk there is that if we go to a split tax rate, the gap can be too great that might prevent particularly smaller businesses for being able to operate here. And that's something we want to prevent from happening. We want this to be a place that people want to come, whether they're residents here or whether they are living in other towns and think that Hingham is a great place to do business. I also really love something that I loved about Hingham from the first time I saw it is I really like the idea of a walkable downtown area, and a downtown area that is welcoming to people and that people can spend time and get to know their community members. And so I think that's something that I would love to be able to continue to grow, while also making sure that the people who are current residents in the downtown area are respected with what their desires are for their neighborhood. So that sort of is I think we really have to focus on growth, though. We can't stop growing. I have this discussion with my wife on a regular basis, and she's like, but the trees. And I'm like, well, there's got to be like a happy medium between development and land use and growing business. If we stop using things, no one else can come here. And we are a unique town where there isn't as much just buildings that exist that we can operate in as a, like, so I lived in Worcester for about a year when we first came here. Plenty of places for business to operate that are existing buildings. We don't have that as much here. And we're doing a great job in use. And so I think that's one of the things that we have to figure out is how do we get creative in growing businesses, but also finding a place that it can stay the small town that it is.
Got it. And Liz, same question. Your approach, you've got actual some experience with the downtown. So not really a big emphasis on that, but can you respond more broadly with respect to end-to-end on the town, and particularly South Hingham?
Sure. So I think our approach needs to be we're open for business, right? We're open to business. No development is not an option. So I think we need to be responsible about development. A large part of the master plan process was how can we be more transparent? How can it be easier for developers to work with Hingham? So I think, developers knowing what they're getting into and what Hingham's expectations are from the get-go is great for everybody and helps move the conversation and those big projects along. So I think it's transparency, ease of use, working closely with the planning board to make sure that we're ready for the projects that come in front of us, and that Hingham has a good reputation for working very collaboratively. As I mentioned in my opening statement, new growth is critical. We need revenue. So development is a critical piece of that puzzle. As you mentioned, I have experience working with the downtown merchants, and that's certainly an important part of Hingham, the charm of Hingham. It's a thriving downtown, which affects the town overall. But looking at new development opportunities, they're obviously concentrated on the ends of town. So 3A corridor, Shipyard, and South Hingham. And I think it's important to continue in those areas, attracting not only new businesses, but people that want to live and work in Hingham in the South Shore. Another big part of the master plan conversation was about housing choice. So creating those kind of mixed use development centers where we're attracting not only good businesses, but good people to live and work here.
Right, and Michelle touched on the split tax rate. With small businesses, all businesses just get hit with the maximum unemployment. Hit from the Commonwealth at 60%, and also the businesses don't necessarily contribute any children to the school system, and really have a very low expense footprint in town. As far as consuming resources, what is your position on the split tax rate issue?
Sure. So I support a single tax rate. I think as you all know, but an important point that sometimes gets lost in this conversation is having two different tax rates, one for personal property and commercial, doesn't actually increase the tax levy. It just redistributes it. So given that Hingham is 89% residential and only 11% commercial at this point, the tax rate would have to be so extravagantly more for commercial to move the needle at all for our citizens in terms of their tax rate that I don't think it makes sense. I think it would create more of a hostile working environment, kind of the opposite of what we were just talking about in terms of attracting new businesses. So I definitely support the single tax rate. I think I think it's about new growth, not the tax rate itself.
And then Michelle, have you been following any of the Amazon last mile distribution center permitting up here for South Hingham in the South Shore Park?
So I missed the end of what you said, but I understand you're asking about Amazon. Yeah, so I have been. It's what an interest. This has been something that I've been. I feel like I just don't have enough information, frankly, because everyone has a different opinion on this, right? So I think, one of the things that came up was, the traffic patterns and that sort of things, and some of the things that we've seen with Amazon in other areas aren't specifically going to affect Hingham because of the location of where the Amazon facility is. And so, for instance, it was referenced in Northborough, where it goes directly through a neighborhood for people to be able to get out, or for the truck drivers to be able to get out. And there are multiple areas. In this particular location, that doesn't come up quite as much, and it's close to the highway, so great. I think, you know, it has a potential to bring in more jobs. You know, I am a person who I get a little bit concerned about large companies like Amazon driving out small business. But that's not going to happen in this situation because this is a distribution center, so it'll bring jobs. But we've got to do some other things in order to get people to utilize small business as opposed to buy things on Amazon. So I don't think in this particular case that Amazon being here is going to impact purchasing as far as businesses. I am a little bit, my question is, because it's so close, are people like, oh, I can get this today, and will that increase their purchases of Amazon? So some things I'd like to look into a little bit more, and I wonder if that's the case. If I order it at 8 a.m., do I have it by 5 p.m. Rather than just running downtown and grabbing something? And so I think that's a question that we need to look more closely at. But I also am in favor of more jobs and opportunities for people. And so if that's something that it brings, because what it will do is they will hire people from other communities, and guess where they will shop? They'll purchase gas here. They'll go over to Derby Street shops where there all are small businesses. So I think that is one of the things that you could go either direction. At this point in time, I like the idea of bringing any business to Hingham and bringing more people to Hingham. So
well, it is such a new concept. I think the jury's, you know, still out on how it's going to play out. So it's a great, you know, it's a great source of, you know, questions, concerns.
Yeah.
I will comment also that when the permitting came through on that, it was earlier in the COVID cycle.
Mm-hmm.
When I looked at some of your materials, and then you opened and you talked about, you know, more communication with the public. I think just as part of all of our getting used to the COVID world, it wasn't something that was necessarily, you know, in the forefront of everyone's mind. So when you said, you know, I'm getting up to speed, you know, to paraphrase you, a lot of people were.
Yeah.
You know, definitely. And Liz, what are your thoughts on what's happening over there? Have you been following it? And
Sure.
comments, particularly from the perspective of a local downtown business group?
Yes, I have been following it. And from the onset, I did have concerns. It didn't, and it might be related to your earlier point about it happening during COVID. It didn't feel like the information was forthcoming. We were waiting on traffic studies. It felt like there were a lot of unknowns. Part of that is probably also that Amazon is evolving, and these last mile distribution centers in a community like ours is new and evolving. So I think all parties were trying to figure it out at the same time. I would say now, after reviewing the materials and the planning board's decisions, I would say I'm cautiously optimistic about it. I guess I say cautiously because I live in South Hingham, and I know my neighbors are very, very concerned for good reason. But I'm, again, optimistic because I think it is a great, a good example of going through the process. You know, Hingham looking at our zoning bylaws, you know, having a company adhere to those, coming up with mitigation strategies and moving it through the process. It's hard to know what other opportunities it might be preventing or could come down the pike, but based on the information we have in front of us right now, I trust the planning board's judgment on that. But a few things that I would want to do and commit to doing if on the select board are following up on those mitigation strategies and those metrics. So things like, are all the vehicles marked? You know, the vans, the personal cars, are they marked? with the Amazon symbol. What are the traffic counts? Are those metrics at the stoplights? However that is set up, is that actually happening? Are we reviewing that on a regular basis? Another stipulation is if there aren't deliveries on Cushing and Gardner or directly off of Cushing and Gardner, the vehicles are not supposed to be on those side streets. So those types of things, I think we need to stay on top of and make sure that we're following the commitments that Amazon has made, and look forward to them being a good partner for us.
So, and also, Liz, when you did the master planning, were you familiar with any of the other master planning for the park that you talked about? Other opportunities that may be affected. What's your position on some of the growth of the park, say over the next 5 years?
Sure. So I support that growth. I think we have good partners in A.W. Perry and Bristol Brothers. So I look forward to working with them on those plans. My understanding, currently the plans are mostly mixed use. I think there are some creative things we can do there to, again, attract new businesses, but also attract people, whether that's young professionals, young families, people that might want to live and work in that area. So I certainly, support that development. Of course, many of the challenges are related to infrastructure, water, wastewater. I mean, there's certainly a lot of work that still needs to be done there.
Great. And Michelle, you talked about inclusivity and your interests there, and also some of your work in research. What's your position on tools that are available, right? So we've always had this Chapter 40B, which comes around. It's potentially controversial when it comes in. Governor Baker just pushed through his version of housing choice, which allows for changes in the approval metrics, from a supermajority to a simple majority. And then, of course, we've got these opportunities with mixed use housing. What ideas, what interests do you have in that area? Do you have a preferred approach, or any ideas with respect to how that could work out for Hingham?
So I want to say first, I don't love the term workforce housing. I think it's poor language. I think that most people are in the workforce. So when we're talking about people who are earning wages that make it affordable to live somewhere, I think separating out workforce housing that kind of separates out specific jobs from other people who are doing essential functions is a little bit problematic to me, and certainly not as inclusive. And I think one of the things that we learned through COVID is that there are a ton of people who do essential functions. And so when you say you're an essential worker, that used to mean I'm a police officer, I'm a firefighter, I'm a nurse, something like that. Now we realize that essential workers are also the people who work at the grocery store, the people who work at the gas pumps, all of those places, these essential businesses that we need in order to operate. Things like fast food. I cannot tell you how many fast food deliveries I had through COVID because going to the grocery store just wasn't going to work out, or I couldn't get there. And so I think that's the first thing that we need to take a look at, is that we need housing that is, to not use the term affordable housing, but affordable to everyone. And so I think what we need is, the average home value in Hingham is about $850,000. That's not accessible to many people. And what we're finding is the gap between home values that are, much closer to where mine is and these multi-million-dollar houses is widening and widening. And that is making it difficult for people to live in Hingham. And so how do we keep the people who are our essential workers, who are the police officers, firefighters, nurses, and also those people who are working in these essential functions, how do we keep them here? And so I like the idea of the workforce housing. We could probably, there's a lot of things that we need to rename, right? I don't think that it accomplishes, the name accomplishes what we're going for.
Yeah,
I think we need to.
We can, I mean, it's, you know,
Yeah.
someone says workforce housing, we all know what we're talking
Yeah.
about.
So I think we need to be able to find places, find opportunities for housing for all of the people who are trying to live and work in Hingham. And I'd love that. I would like it to be a more diverse neighborhood. I'd like it when I say I live in Hingham for people to not go, how? And that is one of the things that happens on a
So
regular
what,
basis.
so what are the tools that are available to us as a community? I've mentioned a few that, some are longstanding, some are, you know, just, evolving from February, for example, the housing choice. What's the path to get there?
Well, I think the first thing is that, you know, earlier in the year, there was some conversation around, you know, we've reached our benchmark of affordable housing, but that's still not enough. And so I think we need to, just because we've reached the minimum doesn't mean that we don't need more. And so I think that's one of those things that we have to push. One of the biggest factors is going to be education around the community, is making sure that people understand why it is important to have these. And that has, in many of the meetings that I went to, that was one of the things that they talked about being the barriers, is the community being willing to allow those sorts of things. Are the neighbors willing to allow more affordable housing, or just affordable housing in general? And so I think that would be the place that I would start. And I think one of the things that, like you mentioned earlier, with the communication around town channels, is people don't know what's going on. When they have these housing authority meetings, those aren't published on the YouTube channel. They can be. All it has to be is that the chair of the meeting has to be asked to publish it. I've sent emails to multiple of the chairs of multiple meetings asking for those videos to be published, because you shouldn't be excluded from understanding the information just because I have a friend, she's a doctor. She can't be there at the meeting, but that doesn't mean that she shouldn't have access to the information.
Yep.
And so that would be the piece that I would go at, is accessible information and education to start with.
So for Liz, so what Michelle, she described a form of, you know, what they call like a friendly 40B, right? So I'm going to have the same question to you overall for affordable housing, but also see if many towns take that. They say just because there's a cap on the, you know, the 10%, you know, we've reached our goal. We're out of it. You know, we're out of the affordability business. What would your position, your attempts be, as a select person, if you're elected, on the affordability? And we'll use workforce. That's been a term of art, and that's a specific problem that the chamber has identified. They've got a report that looks at where we are going up to 2030, and they've identified an acute shortage. And again, as Michelle said, on the shortage, you know, of essential, and we can certainly, I think everyone does agree that broad definition of, you know, essential workers, particularly after COVID, that was an eye opener. But what would your efforts look like?
Sure. So it's an important question. I think it's a big issue and kind of broad, right? So I think education is the first piece. One, on what we're talking about, affordable in terms of the 40B requirement, or affordable meaning accessible to the average person, average family. I am committed to Hingham being welcoming and inclusive, and that meaning a diversity of people in terms of racial, ethnic, age, disability, you know, a wide range. And I don't think I'm alone in that. That was certainly feedback that came through the community input and visioning sessions of the master plan, that people want Hingham to be more diverse. And again, that means a lot of things. So it's the children that grew up in Hingham being able to come back and afford Hingham as adults. It's the senior citizens that have, you know, spent their lives in Hingham being able to stay in Hingham. It's the essential workers. It's, you know, the people that support our community with town employees, fire, police, teachers, them being able to live here as well. So I think there's a few things. One, like I said, education. The second is, with 40B, we have met the legal requirement. I don't think that should be a check the box, we're done. That should be, okay, we're in control of the situation and we can put the 40B housing where we want it, where it makes sense for town. So looking at properties around town, working with the Affordable Housing Trust, making sure that the Hingham Affordable Housing Trust has the staff and resources that they need, whether that's CPC money, town funding, developers contributing to that. There are, lots of different options there to be explored. As far as the housing choice bill that came in, or that legislation was passed at the tail end of the master plan process. So it's mentioned in the narrative, but it does not dictate the recommendations or actions. So I see that as a very critical first step or first topic for the planning board to tackle. I think that's something they need to look at in terms of workforce housing, near MBTA locations, for example. We have a good amount near the boat, the commuter ferry. We don't have a ton of land near the rail stations, but so we need to look into that more, what that means. And again, how to attract different types of people. Also, there was also another concept that we talked about during the master plan, what we called middle housing. So not necessarily the apartment buildings or the McMansions, but single family, affordable, meaning accessible to young families that want to move to Hingham and be part of the community, people that care about education. Those are the types of families I think we want to attract. And certainly we have many diversity goals. And so I think that's part of that, creating that housing diversity as well.
Let me ask on budget-wise, coming out of COVID, I mean, revenues down, about $1 million, just kind of round, whether it's the meals tax, excise taxes, etc. Yet school funding, up again, of course, and everyone's been spending the last year scrambling to this new hybrid world. Liz, let me ask you, what's your approach to how the town should potentially tackle, the budget shortfalls? Is it a Prop 2.5 situation? Is it a mix of that with something else? What you're thinking on the subject? And Michelle, I'll follow up with you as well. Same question.
Yes, no, thank you for asking that. I think the budget is our single biggest issue facing the town right now. We just had town meeting, as you probably know, on Saturday, and the budget did pass, but we were able to close that budget gap with federal funding. There will be some federal funds that we can use next year, but we will have to be creative about new growth. I think it will be critical for the select board to work closely with the advisory committee on the town financial policy, looking into fund balance that can be used, looking into growth opportunities, thinking creatively, working with our business leaders, and looking at grants. We have a good relationship with our state legislator. I think continuing that working relationship, that line of communication. There is money coming from from federal and state, and so Hingham, needs to be ready for that. With I think historically we have been working with our town boards and committees, having good projects, having good plans that make us good candidates for those types of grant programs. So all of those things, and then kind of as a last resort, a tool that is necessary as part of Prop 2.5 is the override. So I would like to see an override study group work together, working through the options, working through the educational piece, so citizens understand what the impact is on them personally, so that we can make good decisions about what are we willing to pay, and is that commensurate with the level of services we're getting. There are lots of services that people expect and deserve, including excellent education, including a senior center, including public safety building. We need to secure our harbor area, protect the downtown. We have, there's lots of things on the table. And I think, through that education and understanding process, we can figure out how to pay for it and what makes the most sense, and so that people feel like it's worth it to live here.
Right, and Michelle, as promised, same question, and Liz brought up, senior center, public safety. So if you want to touch on any of that as you respond, that would be
I
appreciated.
do, yes. So, the first thing I was pleasantly surprised that at town meeting, there were no holds on any of the budget items. And I think that goes to show how much work was really put in this year and how much discussion, how many 7-hour meetings or whatever they were for, advisory committee and school board particularly. And I think that was the piece where I was a little bit surprised that there weren't any. But I think we all were on the same page, is that we need to fund the schools appropriately. One of the things that I'd like to see is that, the school, they have their budget that pays for everything. And then over the course of time, they have to slash a lot of things in order to meet sort of where they think that they may get an approval. And so again, like Liz said, we were lucky that we ended up getting sort of right at the end there some federal funds, and that will carry over, at least into next year. Who knows, depending on how long this really continues to go, into future years. So we can't count on that being there. And that means we have to get really creative and look at the budgets. And I think I think there are more questions that need to be asked around other budget areas. And so that we can make sure to have the schools that are fully funded. Schools are going to be one of the most important features in people being able to both stay here or people moving here. I came here for schools. I have, planning on a family, and that was one of the #1 reasons that we said we wanted to buy in Hingham. And so, but what you continue to hear is that people are sending their children to other schools because they're not getting their needs met. And if we can meet the needs in the schools, the question is, would they allow their children to go to public school? And that, to me, that is the factor that we need to. I would rather not see the school committee have to slash and slash and slash things off of their budget in order to know that it can be met. And so the second piece is mention of the override. Prior to the funding coming in, I was very clear that I'm open for an override, and I think that we have to be in. And I said that. And if we cannot be creative about the way that we do our budgets. Now, again, we got lucky, we didn't have to do it. But now we've just pushed that off into probably next year. And so the select board is going to have to take a very close look at what this looks like. But I just had a conversation with someone yesterday that they are about taxed out of Hingham. And that is a place that I do not want to see. And so I think before an override, we really need to look at what services are we providing, and are we adequately funding them? I do have some concerns about the public safety building. I know that we need it. I've been at the police station. I did the Citizens Police Academy, and I've been there. And so I know that they need to move. I know the senior center needs more space, but a couple of years ago, we said, okay, this is just a plan. And then all of a sudden it was, nope, we need to go ahead and secure this property. We paid a significant amount over the property value, which is a concern to me. And then we move right into, okay, wait, now we want a committee in order to create the designs for this. And so that is concerning to me, that we're saying we're going to be patient, but really, every time we turn around, we're making a new decision for this building. When we just did the police station, not 20 years ago. And so that is the place where I think that we need to really be looking is, and luckily we have the master plan. So hopefully that is going to contribute to us planning for the future. But things like building a building 20 years ago, or, retrofitting a building 20 years ago and already having to correct it, that's a concern to me. That's a waste of money. And we do not need to be doing that for the people who are going to be raising their families here, who are children now in our town. And so I want us to look much better at what we look like in the future.
Right, and specifically, let's grab that issue. A proposed senior center relocation, lease to a public safety building. What are your positions on that?
I'm sorry, let me just interrupt. Did you get, Jeff, you might have been a little bit cut out on that. So I'm not sure.
Can you hear me now?
Yep.
So this question was a follow-up senior center and public safety new building proposed down on Lincoln Street. What are your positions on that issue?
I think we do need a public safety building. I know it felt like with a special town meeting in the fall, it felt a little rushed. Hingham, as you know, doesn't really rush decisions, and there are many study committees. So I don't feel like this is a rash decision. I think the committee has been working on it for years. The current town hall, we all know, used to be a school. So it really was never a good senior center, police station, or town hall, frankly, or school department, right? Everything was kind of retrofitted into there. So it was a good stopgap. It was a good use of the resource we had, but it was never optimized for any of those operations. I do support the public safety building. I actually like how they're doing the process in a staged approach. There's many options for community input. So Saturday at town meeting, we approved the next phase, the design phase. So, everyone that I'm talking to that has concerns about it, how big is it going to be? What is it going to look like? Go to the meetings, get involved. There's opportunities to have a say in what the design is. So I'm very much in favor of the phased approach in terms of decision-making process as well as budget. So I think that's a good approach to that situation. Our police and fire need safe working conditions. The North Street Fire Station is in poor shape. It's unworkable at this point. So I do, and these buildings don't happen overnight, right? I mean, this is still a multi-year process we're talking about, even once the design is approved. And knowing that project has to happen before the senior center happens, is further motivation for me to keep things moving along, because even at the current pace, if there are no issues, we're still several years out of that being done. So I think, that needs to be considered. So I support both of those projects, and I encourage people to get involved if they have concerns about it.
So Liz, Michelle brought up with the federal funding coming, it's great, but the other shoe's going to drop at some point in the future. It's a bit of a kicking the can down the road, perhaps, subject to different things happening. But she also brought up school quality, which if we had this conversation 5 years ago, I'd say, well, what are you crazy? Hingham's got great schools. And then not to hang my hat on U.S. News and World Report, but one of my now long time ago Hingham graduates sent me something saying Hingham, I think, was 55th ranked on U.S. News World Report's criteria, but behind Norwell, behind Cohasset, behind Duxbury, other so-called peer schools considerably behind. I'm sure you saw that. What are your thoughts on that?
So it's a good question. I moved to Hingham for the schools. Before I had children, my husband and I, when looking at different suburbs, we fell in love with the harbor, the downtown, but we were very much reading Boston Magazine at the time, right? That's where young couples were looking as to where to move. And at that point, Hingham was top 20. And that was a deciding factor for us, absolutely. I have 2 children in the schools. I have been, volunteering in the schools for over 10 years. I do feel like there are excellent things about the schools. My children have had excellent teachers. There's excellent programs. Through my work on Hingham Education Foundation, I think there's a really nice public-private partnership there. There's lots of good about the school. I do not think that all parents consider the schools excellent right now. I think there's a lot of room for improvement. I attended the town hall focused on special education last week, and the stories were heartbreaking, to be frank. So I think there's a lot of room for improvement in terms of general education and special education that will impact and help all students. The school department is embarking on a strategic planning process. That was one of the line items in the budget that was just approved. And I'm certainly looking forward to that process. I think we have an opportunity after going through COVID of reimagining education, and figuring out what works, what doesn't, and what we need to do to provide excellent education in the year 2021 and beyond. I think you can say Hingham schools were excellent in the 90s and probably early 2000s, but things have changed. The technology has changed, the approach has changed. So we need to, make sure that, again, we're looking at the entire student population, and really meeting the needs of all our students. We're looking at more AP classes, more electives, more vocational training, better reading programs. 20% of students have dyslexia. We don't have a strong program for dyslexia. So there's lots of opportunities there. So I, very much look forward to working with the school department in partnership with the school committee, to demonstrate Hingham's commitment to that. This is a community that values education. And certainly the select board needs to be that voice in supporting the school committee.
All right, Michelle, this is a little bit of, so this is a nice follow-up, I think, for where you were going with this. What would your comments be? And Liz mentioned, for example, up to 20% of students with dyslexic spectrum, if you will. We've all heard stories of parents trying to get funded additional out of school or other school district types of education, where it's not provided in the public schools. With your background, any perspectives on your view of the public school system?
Yeah, so I think the first thing is that it's about the tone of the select board. And so historically, if you go back and watch some of the meetings around the budget, around the school committee, they're like, well, we give you money, however you spend it. And I mean, that might even be a quote. We give you the money, it's up to you how you spend it. And I think, to Liz's point, we have great teachers, but they cannot meet the needs with enough people. And so one of the things that we see, so I work primarily with adults, and they do not have the resources in many public schools in order to meet their needs. And so then we're forced to send people to specialized schools outside of the district, which costs us even more money. And so, and I think then that creates a greater gap for people when they're not able to attend school in their own community. So now they are not going to the same school as their neighbors. They're not getting some of that socialized activity. We're creating we're othering people by doing that. And that's one of the things that I really fight for as a social worker is we are all just like humans trying to get by on a day-to-day basis. And what we need to be able to do is create opportunities for people within the systems that already exist instead of sending them to, somewhere else. And so, to Liz's point, dyslexia is with the correct resources, people can meet all of the requirements in the school. But if you don't have the resources, now somebody has to go somewhere else. And that's just not acceptable. And so I think that special education, we have to focus on that. And I think instead of asking the school to cut costs, like I said, we need to be asking, what do you need to meet all of the needs of the students? And that is the tone that I'd like to see on the select board, because that has not been the case. I've probably watched, as many videos as they existed on YouTube of the both the school committee and the select board. And so 5 years back, the tone was always, well, I don't know why you're asking us for so much money. You're over half of the budget, but it's essential. And so of course it's over half of the budget. And
So
so
we
the
have the
tone
budget
is what we need to change. Say that
Right.
again.
I said it's over half of the budget everywhere, right?
Yeah. And it's essential. And so of course we need to spend money, but we need to be asking, what can we do for you in order to make sure that we are supporting the schools, instead of it feeling like it's this fight every single year. And that is the tone that it has been. And that is not the tone that I would go into the select board with.
So Michelle, equal view of the funding of AP classes, things of that nature. I note that, for example, that US News and World Report, I always drill down and I say, what's the difference between the schools? It was apparent to me that it was a lack of students taking the AP courses, not necessarily even passing, but it was the involvement. And I'm not sure if that's because the AP courses are not as available now as they were before, but that's obviously a huge attractor of people and investment in town. What's your position on that?
Yeah, so I mean, as a student that took AP and gifted courses all through my public education, when we're talking about meeting the needs of our students, we're talking about meeting the needs of all of our students, not just the people who need support on the special education side or with dyslexia, but we're also talking about our students who are achieving at a level that needs additional support. And so, but the question is, what is the impact of those students in moving on to higher education? And so if we're offering AP classes, great, but is that contributing to a person being able to move on to a higher level of education? Are they getting funding like scholarships? Are they getting grants? Are they getting those things because of the education that they are getting in the school system? And so, like I said, we need to support all of the students. And so if we have the opportunity to provide additional AP classes, the question is, what is the need? Now, I haven't done any specific research on the need of the students. I did see the presentations, but I don't remember those statistics specifically. But if there is a need for any student, we need to meet it. And I mean, I remember, going to school and I had to go to a different program in order to have a gifted program because it didn't exist at the school that I was at. But that was something that was accessible to me. Are we making things like that accessible to students?
Excellent. And Liz, what about your perspective on excellent point that Michelle brought up about kind of a ROI, if you will, on those additional courses? Do you see a correlation between having those courses, retention of students in the public school system, and preservation or enhancement of the residential valuation base in town?
I think there is some correlation. I don't know if it's a direct correlation, but some things that I think are worth looking into are how many AP courses are offered based on the research I've done of Hingham High versus some surrounding private schools is that they're actually very comparable. We have kind of the basic subjects. We also have computer science, which was that was part of the Code Red campaign that the Hingham Education Foundation did. But some other issues I think are worth looking into. I've heard a lot of discussion about the concept of leveling. There are students that receive special education services on an IEP that could excel in those AP classes and should be given the option to take those classes. I've heard of scheduling issues. Obviously, this year is kind of a misnomer. There were lots of scheduling issues. They didn't have the staff to teach computer science, so that was an issue. But in a regular year, do students have room in their schedules? Can they take the classes that they want? I think that is really important. And I do think it's related to if families that value education with high performing students are staying in town, are supporting the public schools, and are going to move to town. I think there is a correlation there. I think people are paying attention to the high school rankings and college rankings. Who's going to what four-year college? What does life after Hingham High look like? What is the support system? What is the guidance department doing? I think those are all critical elements that make a high school excellent.
Right.
So
the military, as Michelle mentioned with her background as well. We've got really good outcomes in town.
Yes.
That is important to track. It's going to be interesting because you know, the person who prevails for winning the seat is going to be getting the seat of Mary Power. And Mary's really been, you know, that I always say Mary's got just a great way of looking at things, and she's been a real asset. So it strikes me that you both look at the issues in a very logical way, understanding kind of the breadth of what needs to be provided, and are aware of, you know, what all the financial considerations are as you'd approach the seat, certainly. With that, what I'd like to do is I'd like to give you each an opportunity for a closing. We'll give 2 minutes. I think, Liz, if I did it right and Eric's advising me correctly, I think you start off and then we'll finish up with Michelle. Make sure you're not muted, Liz. Still muted?
Yep.
There you go.
Okay. Just 1 second.
Yep, take your time.
Okay. Okay, can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay, great. All right, well, thank you to everyone who has engaged in this process, participating today and watching at home. Thank you to the Hingham Business Council for hosting the candidate forum, and to you, Jeff, for moderating. Hingham's success relies on citizens being engaged and stepping forward to serve. I look forward to having a seat at the table serving our town on the select board, bringing the perspective of a woman, a parent, a volunteer, and a professional in finance and management. We are at a critical moment in time when much work needs to be done to invest in our schools, creatively engage in responsible development, preserve our financial health, and build a welcoming and inclusive community for all. Throughout my service in town, I have demonstrated my strengths of listening, researching, advocating, and inspiring. While it's important to know how we align on the important issues we discussed today, it's possibly more important that you know my character, my strong work ethic, integrity, honesty, transparency, and commitment to approaching problems from the lens of what is best for all of Hingham. Again, I respectfully ask for your vote. Thank you
very much. Michelle, would you like to start your closing?
Yes. All right. I'm running for the select board to build a stronger, more resilient, more future-ready Hingham. I realize that my path to this position is not traditional, and my service to this community has been different than many who have served on the select board in Hingham. But the traditional path is not the only path. I think it would be naive to assume we can't make improvement in the way that we do things. We're not doing them perfectly, and we have to adapt to changing circumstances in this town. We have to engage in a process of growth in order to grow Hingham. We need to improve communication on town channels and throughout the community, like I said, so people can receive timely critical updates and that everyone can plan. Examples like Amazon, where the communication just wasn't effective and creates a lot of questions we can avoid by better communication. We have to ensure, like we talked about, that our schools are structurally sound and fully staffed. We have to support the aging community by providing amenities and services that meet their needs. And we have to build a more flexible, accessible, and more inclusive and greener Hingham. I have always looked for opportunities to step up, and electing me as a select person is an opportunity for the town to have a different perspective and a new kind of leader. Thanks.
Excellent. Thank you very much. I appreciate it. We're going to conclude this morning's programming. This will be released on other outlets as we go forward. Best of luck to you both on the upcoming election. I appreciate your participation. You did a great job. You both be very good for the position.
Thanks so much.
Thanks so much.
Thank you, everyone.
Take care.
Thank you. Take care. Bye-bye.
Thank you.